that they almost destroy their own reputation. In the 1970s, Holden created advertising campaigns that were so outrageous, so controversial, that they had to be buried faster than evidence at a crime scene. We're talking about commercials that glorified illegal street racing, featured questionable content, and sparked public outrage across the nation. Today, I'm showing you the forbidden footage that Holden hoped would stay buried forever. The red-hot machine that burned too bright. A Holden Tirana GT-RXU-1 screaming down a city street at illegal speeds, tires smoking, engine roaring, while the camera captures every reckless moment in glorious detail. This wasn't some underground street racing footage. This was Holden's official television commercial for their hottest muscle car, and it was about to create the biggest advertising scandal in Australian automotive history. The Red Hot Machine campaign launched in 1971 with a simple promise: own a Tirana XU1 and you could drive like a professional racer anywhere you wanted. Holden's marketing team had crafted what they thought was the perfect recipe for selling V8 muscle cars to testosterone-fueled young men. The ads showed the XU1's 308 cubic inch V8 engine launching the car from traffic lights like a rocket, leaving other vehicles in clouds of tire smoke. Every scene was designed to make viewers feel that behind the wheel of this machine, they were invincible. But Holden crossed every line imaginable when it came to responsible advertising. The commercial featured extended sequences of cars weaving through traffic at dangerous speeds, racing side by side on public roads during what appeared to be regular business hours and performing tire-smoking burnouts in suburban neighborhoods. One particularly shocking scene showed a Tirana cutting off a family sedan to win an impromptu street race, while another featured the car blasting through a school zone, with children visible in the background. The Tirana ads hit television screens like a declaration of war against road safety. Within days, parents' groups were flooding Holden dealerships with angry phone calls. The Royal Automobile Club of Victoria issued a statement condemning the campaign as irresponsible and dangerous. Local newspapers began running editorials questioning whether car companies should be allowed to advertise illegal driving behavior during primetime television hours. The controversy exploded when Channel 7's current affairs program, Today Tonight, dedicated an entire segment to what they called Holden's Death Wish advertising. The show featured interviews with accident victims' families, traffic police officers, and safety experts who all condemned the commercials. One particularly damning moment came when a traffic sergeant demonstrated exactly which laws the Tirana ads were encouraging viewers to break, counting over a dozen separate violations in a single 30-second commercial. Government officials began asking uncomfortable questions about advertising standards in the automotive industry. The Federal Minister for Transport announced he was considering new regulations that would require all car advertisements to include safety disclaimers and prohibit the depiction of illegal driving behavior. This threat sent shockwaves through the entire automotive advertising industry, not just Holden. Holden executives found themselves in full damage control mode. The company's board of directors held emergency meetings as dealership owners reported customers canceling orders over the controversy. The ads that were supposed to boost sales were actually driving customers away, particularly families who had traditionally been loyal Holden buyers. After just 3 weeks on air, Holden pulled the entire Red Hot Machine campaign. The company issued a public apology, promising to review all future advertising through a new safety committee. But this embarrassing retreat was just the opening act in Holden's 1970s advertising disaster trilogy, when sex sold cars and sparked outrage. Learning absolutely nothing from their street racing disaster, Holden's marketing department decided their next brilliant strategy would be to drape bikini-clad women over their muscle cars like human hood ornaments. What followed was a series of commercials so jaw-droppingly inappropriate that they made their illegal driving ads look like public service announcements. The 1972 Hot Holden Nights campaign represented everything wrong with automotive advertising in the early 70s. Holden's creative team convinced themselves that sex appeal was the secret weapon for capturing the wallets of young Australian men shopping for V8 power. Their research showed that buyers aged 18 to 30 responded positively to attractive women in car advertisements. So they decided to crank that concept up to 11. The resulting commercials featured women in revealing clothing posed suggestively across Holden Monaros and Tiranas in ways that would make a strip club owner blush. The camera work was deliberately exploitative, focusing more on the models' bodies than the actual vehicles being advertised. Long, lingering shots emphasized curves, while the cars themselves often appeared as blurry background elements. The script treated women as interchangeable accessories, with lines like, "Get your hands on a real machine," delivered while women caressed car hoods in slow motion. Even by 1970s standards, these ads pushed boundaries that most advertisers wouldn't dare approach. While other car companies occasionally featured attractive women in their marketing, Holden's approach was aggressively sexual in a way that shocked viewers who expected family-friendly content from Australia's most trusted automotive brand. The commercials played during evening hours when children were watching television with their parents. The women's liberation movement was gaining momentum across Australia, and Holden had just painted a massive target on their corporate back. Feminist groups organized letter-writing campaigns demanding the immediate removal of what they called degrading and objectifying advertisements. The women's electoral lobby issued statements condemning Holden for perpetuating harmful stereotypes about women's roles in society. Progressive media outlets launched coordinated attacks against Holden's advertising strategy. The ABC's Four Corners program dedicated segments to examining sexist advertising in Australian media, using Holden's campaigns as prime examples of corporate irresponsibility. Newspaper columnists across the country began questioning whether automotive companies should be allowed to use sexual imagery to sell products to impressionable young men. The controversy escalated when federal politicians began demanding answers about advertising standards during question time in Parliament. The Minister for Women's Affairs announced she was considering new regulations that would prohibit the use of sexualized imagery in automotive advertising. Television networks found themselves caught in the crossfire, with advertisers demanding airtime, while advocacy groups threatened boycotts. Channel 9 became the first major network to refuse airing certain Holden commercials during family viewing hours, citing concerns about inappropriate content. Other networks quickly followed suit, forcing Holden to either edit their ads heavily or limit them to late-night time slots where they reached far fewer potential customers. Facing mounting pressure from multiple directions, Holden executives made the expensive decision to reshoot entire advertising campaigns. The company hired sensitivity consultants and established internal review committees to prevent future scandals. But their troubles were far from over, because their next advertising strategy involved declaring all-out war on their biggest competitor. The anti-Ford war that almost destroyed everything. The 1973 Ford Fax campaign launched nuclear warfare against Ford in a series of attack ads so vicious they made political campaign commercials look like friendly neighborhood chats. Holden's advertising executives convinced themselves that the most effective way to sell Commodores and Tiranas was to convince Australian car buyers that Ford vehicles were fundamentally unsafe, unreliable, and engineered by people who apparently learned automotive design from cereal box instructions. This wasn't your typical competitive advertising where companies highlighted their own strengths. This was a full-scale assault on Ford's integrity as a manufacturer. The campaign featured a series of commercials with youthful-looking spokespeople comparing Holden and Ford vehicles in various scenarios, making scathing critiques of Ford engineering that seemed both authentic and damaging. The most brutal example involved mock crash test footage that made Ford vehicles appear significantly less safe than competing Holden models. The commercials used selective editing and misleading statistics to support their claims, presenting isolated incidents as evidence of systematic problems with Ford's entire approach to automotive manufacturing. Other ads questioned Ford's commitment to Australian manufacturing and suggested that choosing a Ford over a Holden was somehow unpatriotic. Ford's legal department launched an immediate counteroffensive. Ford sued for misleading claims and had regulators launched an inquiry into comparative advertising standards. Ford executives issued public statements calling Holden's campaign desperate and dishonest, while threatening additional legal action if the commercials continued airing. The rivalry riled up brand loyalties to the point where Holden and Ford fans were debating the ads at showrooms nationwide. Government regulators stepped in when the Advertising Standards Board received hundreds of complaints about the campaign's misleading content. Officials threatened new restrictions on comparative advertising that could affect how all automotive companies marketed their products. The entire industry faced potential regulatory changes because of Holden's aggressive tactics. After 8 weeks of legal threats, Holden pulled the campaign and quietly rewrote its playbook. The company paid substantial damages to Ford, issued public apologies, and established internal review processes to prevent future advertising disasters. What happened next would mark the end of an era that had defined Australian automotive advertising for nearly a decade. These advertising disasters transformed Holden from a reckless rebel into a responsible corporate citizen almost overnight. The company established review committees, hired sensitivity consultants, and created advertising standards that became industry benchmarks. By 1975, Holden's commercials featured families, safety messages, and responsible driving behavior. Which controversial ad shocked you most? Has modern car advertising lost its rebellious edge, or did it gain necessary wisdom? These banned commercials now circulate among car enthusiasts as forbidden classics, reminders of when automotive marketing crossed every line imaginable. Drop your memories of controversial car ads in the comments below and subscribe for more buried automotive history that manufacturers hoped would stay